Do you want to pause it when I'm gonna do a 10-minute break just so that people can get water or whatever if they need it? Do you want to pause it during that or keep it rolling?
Keep it rolling, but I'll probably sit here and just,
I mean, I'm gonna also be around to answer questions. So it's more for the participants than necessarily me, and I'll still answer any questions that people have during that time.
Okay.
So I guess I won't be dead.
Sounds good. All right, so we're recording, we're live streaming. I'm gonna start letting people
Hey,
in.
YouTube.
And hello, YouTube. Start letting people in. We don't need to start right away, but
yeah, no, I'm gonna give people a few minutes and then I'm gonna introduce myself, the company, my background, answer any questions about that, what we're doing with the company, how it relates to AI, all of that.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're still getting more people in the waiting room. And
always takes 5 minutes to have people really jump on.
Yeah. That's just the world. Okay.
Yeah, so you go out here, make water here for the
Oh yeah. You remember I was saying that one time I had a ton of windows and tabs open.
Oh,
So,
I always have a
someone
million.
that HackDuke here saw my windows, and I'm proud to say that I still have a similar situation going on.
I have like 8 things minimized on my computer because there are just too many different windows, each with a ton of tabs.
That's just how life is sometimes.
Yeah. How is everyone? While we're waiting for everybody else to jump on, feel free to jump off, mute, jump on camera if you want, ask any questions while we're waiting for everybody to join.
Real quick, are there any links you want to put me in, or you want me to put into the chat? Or you can put them either one.
Yeah, I'll let people contact me individually if they're interested in the company for now.
Right.
Because we have an interview process, but I'll actually put in the chat a link to what we're going to cover. That's the Notion for tonight. And we're also going to use the Notion tomorrow for a walkthrough that's more hands-on.
All right. So we'll get started in a few minutes, everyone. We're just letting everyone, give everyone a couple more minutes to jump in, and then we'll get started soon.
I know, I like the thought.
Just gotta send something to the DKU team real quick so they know about this stuff.
Sounds good.
Wow. You can't even draw straight lines. I appreciate you appreciate the appreciation. Also, this is the background.
I'm going with this background tonight. More fun.
I think I've seen that somewhere.
I've used this in classes before that had
That's
nothing to
good.
do with Duke, just because it was March Madness.
Yeah. All right. Then we can get started now. Anyone else who joins, they can watch on YouTube the replay, and anyone who can figure out where I am based on this background can honestly probably just watch over my shoulder, literally. So, everyone, welcome here to the Intro to AI workshop to kick off HackDuke 2023. We're excited to have an AI expert. Honestly, he went to Duke with me, class of 09. Eric Fithian, is based in New York City, and he is here to talk about AI. So, Eric, is there anything you would like to start with?
Yeah, so I'm going to just give you a little bit of background about myself, what I do now, and the connection between a lot of the things I do in AI, as well as talk a lot about the general concepts of AI throughout this, the background of it, the terminology that you might or might not be familiar with, and then also talk about things that you might not be familiar with in terms of AI. Everyone knows ChatGPT and chatbots. They don't necessarily know the enterprise level solutions that accompany that and what companies are doing internally in terms of AI, as well as a lot of other use cases. So I guess just to start out, I'll let you know that, again, my name is Eric. I currently work at an AI company in New York City. You can, by the way, jump off mute, be on or off camera, but jump off mute and interrupt me anytime you want. I prefer people actually interrupting me in my courses. It makes my life easier rather than people feeling that they have to wait for a break and then they forget the question. Or just seriously, anytime you have a question, jump in. And almost always, in my experience, when people jump in with a question, half the other people have that same question. They're just afraid to ask it. So I definitely encourage that. But yeah, just to give you more of a background about myself, I was at Duke. Believe it or not, I did not graduate from Duke. I was a decided professional poker player and was more fun at the time. So I decided to do that. I eventually did go back to school. I graduated from Columbia here in New York City. I'm still more of a Duke fan. Duke sports are still what I love. I loved my time at Duke. I love the people I met at Duke, such as Scotty. But I did graduate from Columbia. Since then, I was in education, and that led me down a path of I was leading math programs and others. I didn't know how to code, and so I learned to code later. I was almost 30 when I learned to code and anything about code, honestly. So I think anybody who is learning about software development, AI at a younger age is way ahead of the game. I went to coding boot camp. I followed that up with a number of years where I worked in ed tech. So I worked in technology as a developer in an educational company, and I always loved education. So it just worked for me. After that, I worked for the company went out of business actually during the pandemic. I worked for a number of years at General Assembly, which is coding boot camp. I was a lead instructor. I tended to work both a 9 to 5 cohort as well as being the lead instructor in nights and weekends, 20 hours a week. So usually 60 hours a week plus prep time, just coding because education and technology is fun for me. I decided to leave that company after being a member of the products advisory board, as well as, a very senior person, one of only 7 out of 42 lead instructors who were full-time staff members. And I decided to work with Amelia, which is a AI company here in New York City. Amelia does enterprise level solutions and AI solutions. And it's a lot more than just the chatbots, but we'll focus on that because that's what people understand most. But we'll talk about some other things that we do. And we're going to talk today about, a lot of the AI that I've learned through there, as well as other interests I've had because AI has always been interesting to me. And just to let you know, I am also started my own company. I started my own company because working one full-time job is not enough for me, apparently. Along with having a daughter who's 17 months now. So I started my own coding bootcamp company, and the whole goal is to make it less expensive and a higher quality experience for students. I'm working along with some of the top lead instructors who left General Assembly to have it more student focused and also to bring AI into that, because to me, the two have always had an important merge. I know students here are generally, at least interested in computer science, if not majors in computer science, probably relatively new. The whole idea is we have to keep up with what's the most important in the field. And I think it goes without saying that right now, artificial intelligence is the most important part of this type of field, and by a lot. A lot of technologies are important. JavaScript will always be important. React is probably going to be important for a long time. TypeScript's important. But AI is going to change fundamentally a lot of things about the world. We're also going to talk about a lot of the myths of that, about robots taking over the world, Terminator type scenarios. What is and is not realistic, and what are some of the things to know about the different types of implementation, and what is realistic for a future in terms of AI, and what are the next steps in terms of where AI is headed. Any questions or comments about that before I continue? Now, I know I put this out of the chat, but I'll put it out again. Just again, if you look at that, this is going to be what we're going to go through today. Scotty, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Is that possible to adjust?
Yeah, you should be able to do it now.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. So can you see my screen?
I can see it.
All right. So you're seeing what is artificial intelligence, all of that. This is going to be what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to use a lot of my experience working in AI as a way to explain what I know about these areas. But the background is it's been happening since the 50s. These doomsday scenarios as well about it's going to replace humans have been happening since the 50s. That'll still be a theory. There's no proven way that could anytime soon happen. More importantly, I would also say in some ways it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what computers are. And so that's what ultimately at the end of the day we're going to talk a lot about is what are computers? Why are they useful? Why is AI useful? What's it doing? And how does it do those things better than humans? And what do humans do much better than AI and computers? Because at the end of the day, everything is a tool. Nothing is right or wrong. It's just every job that you do, if you're, bringing a hammer to a job that needs a saw, it's not going to be effective. It's about finding the right tools for the different jobs that we have. Now, in terms of AI, what are the different types? We have reactive machines. Now, that's essentially your if-else conditions. That's why I've heard people refer to AI as very complex conditional statements. And in a way, that's not really wrong. That's essentially what reactive machines are. Examples of that are like chess playing computers or self-driving cars. They take in snapshots of current situations and a lot of different information. So in terms of the chess playing computer, it's looking at the board and it's saying, okay, there are X number of possible boards in chess. And, I've learned about all of the different values of the pieces. And based on all of this information, I'm going to choose what the best path is. Based on what I'm noticing, what the different options are, what the next options are, the more advanced you make those algorithms, the better the program will perform. They're a limited memory. Unlike reactive, which is just taking in the snapshot of the current situation and making decisions based on the current situation, limited memory actually is information about past events. Does anybody know an example of that? So a lot of ChatGPT, chatbots are going to do that. Speech recognition systems, all of those. So chatbots are essentially, with ChatGPT, with Google Bard, with, I think Meta put one out recently. I still call them Facebook, but Meta put one out recently. There are a lot of different ones that are out there. They have been trained on a select set of information from a limited time. I think in ChatGPT's case, it's 2021. Although with certain plugins, you can get up-to-date information from current websites. But that's what, is known as the limited memory. Theory of mind, that's just, it's going to understand your emotions. Now, people say that that doesn't exist. That's not fully true. Algorithms have an idea about how happy somebody is, how upset somebody is, how the process is going. Because again, it can be trained on all of that. That's more provable and realistic as an implementation of AI as opposed to other versions. Self-aware, general intelligence, and then super intelligence, those get into, an AI essentially becoming a human. I don't believe that that's something that'll ever happen. Does that mean there aren't some very smart people who do believe this? Yes, there are. I know Elon Musk. I know a lot of the famous people who are very smart in certain ways. Not saying they're very smart in every way necessarily, but a lot of really smart people do believe in some of these theoretical potential issues. I would say that essentially it's a misunderstanding of what computers are. So in terms of what we're talking about with, AI and the chatbots, ChatGPT, any of those, it's trained on a tremendous amount of information. And the training on that information allows it to respond, not always accurately, not always the same way to every user, but it'll give you a general response. I would say the best implementation of AI is to use it as a template. An example of that is, Ashley, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Just when you say they're trained, does that mean there's a software installed that makes them understand information that's already online, or what does the training of ChatGPT look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to actually show you what training looks like later on for Amelia and what different types of files look like. Everybody's different, but we'll definitely talk about trained versus untrained models. Training a model essentially is a way to take a lot of different utterances and statements and information, put them into a file, build a model out of that, and then have that model useful as a way to recognize what's actually happening in terms of how to understand new utterances that aren't going to be the same as any of those training files, but training's a big part of this and definitely something we're going to talk about. AI does need to be trained to a pretty significant degree as well. And we will see that in action through looking at Amelia and some of our infrastructure that I can show you that's not proprietary. Other questions?
Great, thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I told you, seriously, I like when people interrupt. That's a good thing. So how is AI used today? It's used in every industry, really, but there are different ways that industries can use AI. This is one of the things that's been talked about a lot from experts in AI that I've talked to and worked with. One of the things that's interesting is ChatGPT is generic. Google Bard is generic. The expectation is that that's what we're going to go to, is more a ChatGPT that's only for healthcare, a ChatGPT that's only for finance, a ChatGPT that's only for retail, because there tends to be more overlap and correlation, and you don't need to make it as labor intensive and as massive a model as it is with those, because honestly, ChatGPT is expensive. Actually, I was looking this up the other day. So yeah, they do have a report. Apparently, it's so labor intensive to run ChatGPT. It costs the company itself $700,000 a day. I've heard estimates up to $950,000 to $1 million a day. It's labor intensive. You have to understand when we're talking about AI and what it's doing a lot of behind the scenes work, and it's using algorithms that are optimized, but that'll have, large big O notations for those of you who understand what big O notation is. Does anybody not understand what big O notation is? But even if it's optimized, it's going to take a lot of processing power to do what it does, because again, the training files for something like ChatGPT, just on algorithms, as somebody who's a developer and loves algorithms, they're actually one of my favorite things. ChatGPT was trained on millions of algorithms. That's a lot of algorithms to train something on. So that's how it gets good at recognizing patterns. That's what these AI tools are doing. They are taking in a tremendous amount of data. And ultimately, that's what computers are. They process things at billions of times the speed compared to humans. The most basic example of that is if I did a very complex math question, I could have all of you write it out and take time and do it yourself. And I'm sure all of you remember those days in school where they would have teachers say, you can't use a calculator. Why? Because computers are 1,000 times faster than us, and sometimes a lot more than 1,000 times faster than us. And the case of a very complex math question, it'll get it in a fraction of a second, whereas I might take several hours to go through that if I'm a good student, because it's a very hard question that has a lot of steps to it where the computer processes things at incredible speeds. That's why fundamentally I don't believe in a lot of the doomsday scenarios that a lot of these people talk about. Is fundamentally, yes, it can start to understand some emotion. Yes, fundamentally, it can find ways to train itself. Not well. There's no proof that it can do those things well. There's no proof that it'll ever be able to do those things well. Fundamentally, that's not what computers do. You need humans to understand context and situations and all of that. The doomsday scenarios assume that you can eventually train computers to understand context. There's no proof that that will ever happen, that is something that's realistic down the pipeline. And So that's why I say a lot of the things that people talk about and catastrophize in a lot of ways is really just information that I would say is taking theory and applying, if theoretically this can happen, then there would be problems. Until those things happen, nothing will be problematic. Right now, AI's use case is for, getting more of an idea about what specific ailment somebody has. Training a computer by putting in a tremendous amount of data of these are the 5 symptoms, these are the 3 symptoms, these are the 8 symptoms, and this is the diagnosis, and this was the diagnosis, and this was a misdiagnosed to X when it was actually Y. That's what it's really good at, taking in a lot of that data and then saying, okay, based on that, what is the outcome? And it's usually imperfect at first. So it needs humans to say, no, that wasn't a fever. This was a flu. And let it know. And then it changes and updates its diagnosis in that particular case. And when it's done thousands or millions of times, it gets very, very, very good at very specific tasks. And that is what the implementation of AI really is. Identifying fraud. If you've ever gotten those fraud alerts, that's usually run through an algorithm that says, this looks a little weird. Is this something I should allow? There are a million use cases of it. For students, has anybody done their homework using ChatGPT? Love that everybody always says no, pretends that they've never used ChatGPT or AI for.
Fine. I'm sorry. I used ChatGPT when I was learning from you.
ChatGPT, listen, I'll be the first to admit, yeah, exactly. So don't admit this if this is being recorded, but yeah, I will say from my end of things, in my classes that I teach, I allow people to use ChatGPT. There is a right and a wrong way to use these tools. In fact, this was all generated using AI to respond to. Now, the right way, understanding what prompt engineering is, meaning writing appropriate prompts that'll give you better responses. Also, don't just take the responses. Understand enough that okay, this is a baseline, this is a template. That's what AI is really useful for. This can handle the most generic cases. It cannot know the specific cases. It's not meant to handle all the specific cases. It's meant to give you a very quick baseline that you can then edit, that can make your time to creating something like this even faster. It's to analyze large sets of data and assess risks faster, and then pass that to human who can go ahead and be able to better deal with that potential threat, to better see what might be threats. It is not meant to replace humans. And I will tell you from my side as an instructor, if somebody uses ChatGPT and they let me know and make a comment in their code, because I do like comments in their code, and they say, I use ChatGPT to do this small algorithm, great. It's no different than Google. Did Google change the world? Of course. Google was revolutionary. People can Google answers. Does everybody use Google appropriately? I mean, I've seen people who use Google all the time and tell me all sorts of things about 2020 election or the vaccines or things like that aren't true. I like to say everybody likes to go to omright.com for any of their information and just Google what there is. That's not how we use Google. The difference between a common person who's not a developer or in IT or technology, and somebody who is in this field is using those tools appropriately. Writing better prompts of what are the facts on this side? What are the facts on this side? Understanding that, verifying it, looking at data sources, and then making sure that that's right. But again, it's a good tool, gives you a good baseline that you can then check and go ahead and, edit and improve and do all of that. The submissions of projects that I've seen that use ChatGPT for a small part tend to be very, very, very good. The implementations and projects that I've seen students submit that only use ChatGPT are usually broken and not very good. And I can tell immediately within 2 seconds of looking at the code, maybe it was Google Bard, I don't know. But I know exactly how the person created this. It's very obvious from my side of things. And I'll tell you that's why, people say, oh no, I did this all myself. I can tell that's not true because I know how people would have gone about it if they did it themselves or did. These are common things we see. They're becoming more common. To me, there's nothing wrong with using the tool as what it is, which is a tool for small parts, for understanding what is the future of artificial intelligence, having something up and editing it, and then understanding it at a level where I can explain it to people. That's an appropriate use of artificial intelligence and technology and the tools that we have. Any questions so far? And if your professors get mad at me, I totally didn't say that, so. That's Duke's academic integrity policy, not mine, for my company, which is also an educational company. I've never met professors, and I've, again, worked in education a long time. I've never met professors who would get mad that you're using it for a small part as a tool to get you up and running faster, to get something on the paper that you can then improve and iterate on to make it really your own and a better project than it would have been in the same amount of time. These tools are meant to be time savers, not replacing humans. Will they change the jobs? Is that the future of artificial intelligence? That nobody's going to have a job, it's going to all be done by AI? No. We're always going to need people. Now, does that mean every industry won't lose positions? No, there are industries that will lose, that will become more automated. We all know that. You've seen that, I'm sure, with a lot of customer service people. A lot of the reason I started my company is they're trying to replace live instruction, which I think is the worst idea I've ever heard of, because imagine your professors at Duke only being chatbots that could respond to you. Even if they're good chatbots, that's not a great user experience as a student. Nobody likes that class as much. And there are times and places for AI. There are times and places it should not be used. Any questions about all of this so far? It is expected also in cybersecurity. So cybersecurity, I don't know if anybody's interested in that area. It's one of the really mathematical, but really cool and interesting areas of development. It will be very important to identify threats. All it does is it recognizes patterns. It takes in data and information and recognizes patterns from previous attacks and what were not previous attacks, and combines all that to say, these 5 markers were all hit. Usually when 4 or more are hit, this is a cybersecurity threat that needs to be flagged. So I'm going to flag this at a higher level. Every marker got hit. This is definitely a very serious cybersecurity threat. These are the ways that it does things, is it looks at different markers and different data and is able to essentially split those types of, incoming new responses or new issues into those different buckets. It's going to work, but it will work in, essentially every area. So who knows about LLMs? Large language models. Large language models are ChatGPT is a large language model. Google Bard is a large language model. All of these, new, most commonly seen AI implementations are LLMs generally, large language models that take in a tremendous amount of data and train on a tremendous amount of data. And then they're able to respond to any types of questions. Now, the more generic, the larger the model will be, because ChatGPT was trained on millions and millions and millions of data inputs because it had to be. If you're doing something to only respond to customers about a game of chess, and that's your only, use case, you might find 300 questions about chess, and that's enough. And you only need those, and that's a good start. And if you continue to monitor it and you notice there are other questions that are common that you don't necessarily have answered, you can continue to add to it and improve it. That's why I don't believe in this. It's going to get rid of humans. We need humans behind the scenes. We need developers working on these things. I work with Amelia as a technical trainer to train our clients who do use Amelia as part of their enterprise level solutions. And I get questions all the time about, okay, well, if I have 3,000 developers working on this, Eric, how would I set up this overall folder structure in order to make sure that the work is something that everybody can follow along with? Again, it's not replacing anything. It's moving more jobs from A to B. And that's part of why we need more ways to train potential software developers. That's why when people said, because I heard this a lot. I heard a lot of people saying like ChatGPT means you're not going to need software developers anymore, which is just hilarious to me because that's absolutely not the case. That's not what AI is doing. It's, as a developer, I know it can solve a lot of algorithms. I've seen it solve a lot of algorithms. In fact, a lot of them very, very well. It's not meant to be something that replaces humans. When it builds large infrastructure, it does not do a good job. It just doesn't. The code is sloppy, often doesn't work. It uses a mishmash of styles. It's not going to be able to do what software developers do. It never will be able to do what software developers do. Even when eventually there's a very good one that's only for software developers, it is meant to be a tool that aids in your time development. It is not something that is ever going to be meant to replace developers. Any questions or comments about any of that? Hallucinations and LLMs. Who's ever heard of hallucinations? Does anybody know what I mean when I talk about hallucinations? Hallucinations in LLMs is exactly what it sounds like. It makes up information. There are times you can ask ChatGPT something that's maybe specific about, tell me about the story of this woman who went down in 1935, helped save, these other people. It'll make up a very realistic sounding story about a historical event that absolutely never happened. That's a hallucination in an LLM. The prompting is part of it. The way that these LLMs are trained is another part of it. I know that a lot of people are taught, oh, well, with better training and better prompting, you can get rid of it. No, you can get rid of some of it. Hallucinations will always be a thing. The idea that these are ever going to be perfect models that are never going to give false information. That's like the idea that the internet doesn't have incorrect information on it. And that old commercial about, well, you're not allowed to lie on the internet. Where'd you hear that? The internet. It's that type of idea of course, there will always be biased information on the internet. Of course, there will always be nonsense. There's inevitably going to be ways that gets into training. The more we limit the people who are able to update and train these models, the more information we have to train it on, the more accurate, the less likely these things can happen. The better the overall code is, the better it'll be for us, but hallucinations will always be part of it. That's why, to me, again, you're always going to need humans to verify information, to cross-check, to use best practices, to understand what the best practices are, and to continue to update and improve their existing models. The more we get into smaller LLMs, which sounds weird because it's large language models. What do you mean small versus large? Okay. You should say probably specific LLMs, like industry-specific LLMs, that doesn't have to be as massive, the fewer hallucinations you're likely to have. But again, the newer models are, the less, the more that these will exist. Any questions or comments about this? Again, I would say most of the professionals in jobs in the industries that I know use these tools, especially developers, especially anybody in tech. I think there's going to have to be more information that's secure as a way to improve the security of that. I know for a fact that some companies were upset that their developers were using it so much that some of their code snippets from their actual code were getting leaked to other companies with their implementations of it, because they were just putting in, this is my code, why is this not working, as a way to do. Again, best practice is to be very specific, have it work on small problems, small portions, and then move on to the next portion. After you go back and verify and cross-check and make sure that is working, there aren't edge cases, okay, I can continue. Because again, like anything else, if you don't check and you go and do 5 of these without verifying that information, you're going to get very far along in the process, and you're going to have no idea how to get back or how to get things working. Any questions or comments about that? Also understand the limitations of models. Again, the more you're trying to get these things to do, the worse they are. If you tried to get it to write a novel, it probably wouldn't be the best novel. If you try and get it to explain what are, I'm trying to learn how to sort a set of given, strings in an array in alphabetical order. That's a very specific, very good way to use these AI LLMs. And that type of prompt is likely to be very accurate, where something about just write me a novel with these inputs, not very helpful. It would be better to say, can I write a novel that has these characters and this scene and this type of year? It'd be better, but it still wouldn't be a great novel. It also would be insanely labor intensive for the model to create that. So ChatGPT is gonna, again, be spending $700,000 to, again, I've heard up to $1 million every single day, because these algorithms have to be run behind the scenes. They have to build them. They have to execute them. That takes an insane amount of compute power, and that compute power is going to be very expensive. Again, the better the algorithms are, and theirs are actually very good, the less expensive it'll be, but you have millions of users who are all doing this every single day. It gets expensive. Questions or comments about any of that before I continue? There's more information than I'm going to talk about on here. That's why I give you the link, by the way. So feel free to use that as just general information if you're interested in any of that. And I'm going to be back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And you can go ahead and ask me questions on any of that at that point as well. So trained versus untrained models. Training models essentially means you're pairing it up with key value pairs. So I say, I have pictures of different animals, hypothetically, and I have a picture of a bird. It's going to be paired with bird. I have something else that's, I don't know, cat. And I'm going to say not bird or cat, or I could have, labels of yes or no, bird or not bird. I could have labels of A, B, C, D, or none of those. These are different ways we label our data. The more data we put into, a system, the more accurate it's going to be in terms of being able to do what we're expecting it to do. Being able to take new inputs and actually understand what is the way that this person is trying to, what is the importance or meaning of this user's statement. Any questions or comments about any of that? Now, again, they're both very labor intensive. They're different use cases. Untrained models are going to put in, birds and, frogs or cats and dogs and maybe lions and tigers. There might be multiple buckets, none of which are labeled in untrained data. That's a common example of an untrained data. Is it's going to be something where it's just going to be, these all have somewhat similar features. This other group also has somewhat similar features. Does it, and any new one's going to be moved into the same bucket with anything that it has similar features with. Again, either case, you're going to need humans to say, yes, that's true. That was in that bucket, or for trained data, yes, that is a bird. Yes, that is a flying ant. And then make sure that it's an accurate model before releasing that live to anybody else. But that's essentially what we're doing in terms of training. We have trained versus untrained models. And again, untrained are probably slightly faster to develop. They're not as accurate. They're a little bit more, the trained models are a little bit more labor intensive, a little more expensive, and a little more accurate overall. ChatGPT would be trained data. Everything I do at Amelia is trained data. We don't do untrained models, but I'll show you what that looks like. All right. Natural language processing, NLP. Who's heard of NLP and natural language processing? Maybe it's Friday night. Everybody's a little tired. Mesra, am I saying that correctly? Meraz?
Yeah, you said it right.
Okay, so anything you want to talk about with NLP that you know about, feel free. Or
no, I just used a little bit in one of my classes, but I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting topic, though. I'd love to know more.
Yeah, so this is a lot of what we do. Is it takes a lot of the focus on computers and human interactions. It takes in a lot of text, and it tries to understand both the overall utterance, how to map it, as well as what are the combinations, what's the syntax. I know for my company, every single sentence we take in, we're gonna be training our data on a lot of different factors. Any statement that is going to be mapped to one of maybe 5 or 6 or 20 buckets, when somebody else is doing this and they're making an utterance, we're mapping to see, okay, these are the 5 words in this particular user's utterance. Let me map that against all of the training data in each of these different, buckets. So again, if I have 5 buckets, each with 400 utterances, it's comparing, I am here. It's comparing those 3 words against the utterances of all 2,000 items in my training data, in my models. It's essentially looking through those and saying, how many have all 3 of those words? How many have 2 of those words? How many have 1 of those words? It also looks at things like syntax. What's the object of the sentence? What's the subject of the sentence? Where are these words used? Looks at word pairs. I don't want to map here am I the same way I want to say I am here. It more closely matches I am here to say I am here. And so we're going to say, not only are we scoring it on those words appearing, but we're going to be scoring it based on making sure that, okay, I am, that's a word pair. I am here is a word pair. We can even use triples if you want. I am here is a phrase. Is it exactly matching anything? And so those are going to be ways that we use training data to map to any statement. So again, you might be mapping through a lot of different, thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of different training data every time you write something to ChatGPT. It's looking through all these models. Even if it's optimized, it's still running through a lot of information. That's why it takes a minute to generate. It is doing an incredible amount of processing, and that is very expensive. That is very labor intensive, but it starts to understand human utterances and more appropriately map any statement. So something you say to any of these different items. Any questions or comments about any of this so far?
Yeah, I figure I'd throw in something. I remember working on Markov chains, and what you described, it sounds like Markov chains are kind of one of the really small building blocks that leads to a much bigger AI program, right?
Yeah, and so yeah, it scores things essentially with vectors of 0s and 1s of that matches, that doesn't. And if there are 20 different potential ones, and this, one of the utterances has 14 and another has 16, it's going to map more appropriately to the one with 16 matching 1s in the vectors. Other questions about that?
Yeah, another thing. To write Shakespearean plays, would you rather trust ChatGPT or a bunch of monkeys?
I would rather trust ChatGPT. Just like what would I do? Would I go out on the street, and I live in New York City? Am I just going to go out on the street and ask the first random person I see to tell me more about natural language understanding, or do I think that ChatGPT might better answer that question? Google might better answer that question. Now, if I have the opportunity to speak with one of the founders or an expert in natural language understanding, I'm going to always trust that person, because ChatGPT and Google are generic tools. They'll give me a good idea that I have to further research. That expert is going to have much more information than they do on that specific topic, because the idea that we can train it to be as good as experts in any field is not something I find realistic. It'll become closer to the experts as we get more industry specific tools for a healthcare LLM, finance LLM, and we are seeing those start to be built in the industry, but it's never going to be as good as the experts. And so again, it's more about the source and the reliability of that source. Whereas if I'm talking to some random person who might be just, the first person I see on the streets in New York City, there's a decent chance I have a crazy person telling me about certain conspiracy theories. Could ChatGPT or Google be wrong? Yes. Do I need to verify that information? Absolutely. That's the best practice. Does that mean that they're bad? No, it means they're more accurate than a lot of people, and just they're general, but going to pull a better approximation than somebody else would. And that's what I think is so important in understanding these tools. And that's why I actually don't like that a lot of schools, again, at my former company, and this is one of probably 300 reasons I left and disagreed with them on, is they had a policy that you're not allowed to use ChatGPT for anything. I never implemented that in my classrooms because I don't believe that that's right. That would be like telling people not to use Google ever, or a calculator. It's a tool in the real world. I care about simulating real world experiences, and I find that to be more valuable. Let's learn how to use these tools, but how to use them appropriately as a way to really understand what their value can be.
So I guess there's a Simpsons episode where they had a ton of monkeys just coding or just typing out Shakespeare and all that. Based on what you're saying, theoretically that could happen, but where ChatGPT is able to work much faster, it's way better than a bunch of monkeys. It learns much faster than the average human,
Yes.
at least in that field.
But it'll occasionally spit out one of those hallucinations because it has, it was well trained, and it got 30 different responses from people who are, it should have, and then 2 from crazy people or monkeys happen to slip into the training data. That's always going to happen. And so you have some imperfect training data. That's a fact of life with LLMs, with AI, with Google. You'll get some crazy results if you type in certain things. There have been plenty of screenshots, I'm sure many of you have seen on the internet, of some interesting Google results, some interesting ChatGPT results. And that's why again, they took, not really 30 and then 2. They took 20 million really good sources and then maybe 500,000 really bad sources. And as well as they did overall, which they did an unbelievable job, far better than anybody else. That's why they deserve a lot of the credit. That's why they're well known. That's why they took off the way it did. It's not realistic that it's not going to have some of those and weird solutions and odd situations that it encounters. That's just a fact of life dealing with AI and these LLMs. Other questions? Well, I tend to be a big fan of people getting a 10-minute break because I've seen people, especially at night, Friday night, you've been working hard. I don't want people to feel like I'm zoning out. I need water. I need to go to the bathroom. So go ahead. Feel free to get up, take a break, get some more water. Friday night, and these are students, get a beer if you want. It's 9 o'clock. I didn't say that again if your professors or others get mad. But yeah, do whatever you need to. I'm going to be around, and I'm still going to answer questions about any of my background, any of my company, what we're doing that's unique or different, any of the AI information, and all of that. And then when we're back from break, we're going to do a discussion of AI. We're going to do a walkthrough to better understand the implementations we're talking about in this particular use case. And then we're going to be able to, at the end of all of that, do a Q&A session for all the students here. But take another 9 minutes, and we'll resume then. And you can also ask questions, Scotty.
Actually, I'm just in the middle of a staring contest with your Zoom. So, I just blinked.
Just hypnotized by the background.
It's a good background.
That's the thing. That's what we have to do with the training data of this, is like, If you had asked AI who's going to win, Duke or Clemson, it probably would have said Clemson. And then you always have to correct it and update it so it has the correct information about Duke being a better football team than Clemson.
See, the problem is there's a lot of hallucinations out there. So
Yeah,
it thinks Clemson's better.
exactly. Terrible hallucinations that need to be corrected. And that's what we talk about with imperfect training data.
I think one funny thing, and then maybe this is something we can bring up in the discussion again, but for AI to be absolutely dominant, it also requires the AI to be honest a lot of times. And the average person is gonna just mess with the AI, just troll it and stuff. So I feel like a lot of AI would just get really frustrated with the average person and not be able to function in some dominating way that the creator may have hoped for.
Yeah, that's why if you like look at ChatGPT's information, different models are different, but some of them have like tried to, I'm going to let users continue to improve this. A lot of them have realized that might be a terrible idea because trusting people on the internet to not be trolls and mess with this in horrible ways that you don't want is not a good way to succeed on the internet. Creates real problems with what ends up being said. It gets people banned for very offensive statements. But that's why it's trying to do that. It's just like going to roll its eyes and ignore it. Like, all right, do something else. Or I can't do it. There are ways to customize it to limit people's ability to mess with it. And that's what we're going to continue to see as time goes on.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe we should pull up that Simpsons clip I was talking about where they had the room full of monkeys trying to type up Shakespearean plays or whatever.
You'll have to find that one. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
I'm also going to put out my LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect or know more about my company. By the way, again, we'll mention this at the end. Anybody who gives a referral does get $500. So feel free to, a good way to make some extra money. I don't believe anybody should ever refer somebody to something that they don't fully believe in or know. So that's why I'm here to answer questions on that as well. Because like I say, a daughter and a full-time job working in AI is just not enough. It's not the New York way. We like to work 24/7.
And yet you have time for watching football and basketball.
Often while doing other work.
You're pretty efficient, I will say that.
All right, I'm actually going to refill my water. I'll just be back in 2 minutes. Got the full water glass. I don't think you can see with the background, but somewhat. My huge water glass that I always refill like 5 times a day because I speak too much.
Water's good, man. Hydrate.
Water Boy.
It's a good movie.
Great movie, huh?
Yeah.
So again, I'm here for questions that anybody has while we wait.
I guess we have a little bit of time. Aside from Markov chains, what else can anyone think of from stuff like CompSci 201? What else can y'all think of that maybe is part of AI?
And make it under there. That's fine.
All right, we'll be back in 20 seconds and we'll keep going and start off with the discussion, then a demo of what this stuff does, and also what these files look like, what training files look like, all of that. And we're back. You'll also notice I'm a big fan of all types of tools. In this case, I'm a big fan of a standing desk because I am old and my daughter always wants to grab my hand. I'm always bending over, so that means my back hurts if I don't stand up. If you like to do coding, if you do, a lot of the tech work, please get a standing desk. It'll save you when you get a little older like I am. And it'll make your life better. Before we continue, let me just share my screen again. Is it still sharing?
Yeah.
I think it was still sharing, yeah, because I did want to have the timer up still. So we talked about NLP, we talked about all of these topics, training, all of that. That's great. But it's important to know high level too about the industry specific chatbots are starting to be created. That's the general direction of the industry. It's graded on by most of the experts that I talk to. The reason is ChatGPT is awesome. It is a very groundbreaking, innovative product. However, it is very expensive to run. It costs a tremendous amount of money. Also, the smaller LLMs, which is, again, it's still going to take in a lot of training data, but that is specific to different industries, is going to be important. It's going to be the future. It's going to be the way that things are created later on. Open source will lead the way. And the reason that experts that I've talked to tend to agree on this is the fact that there's nothing proprietary about what ChatGPT is doing. it's not groundbreaking. It's not new science. It's not anything that is theoretical or that people didn't know you could do. It uses much better engineering and development practices than most of the others. It does a much more sound job. It does a much larger data set than has ever been done before. That's why it's so good. But at the end of the day, there is nothing that is proprietary about their technology. That's why most experts believe ultimately open source products and projects will lead the way. I'm a big believer in open source. It's one of the things I did before getting into the industry is worked with open source. To me, open source is one of the most important and under talked about things in terms of all of development. I created an open source project that was better able to do data visualization that was customizable in a single page React application for AWS metrics for any company that was on AWS, so that you didn't have to go to Datadog. You could just npm install my solution and have a better data visualization that you don't have to pay a lot of money for. Important for startups and things like that. Open source is the most important part of software development to me, because of the fact that without open source, we would not move at the speed we do. Nothing has ever moved at the speed that technology does today. It's moving much, much faster than any industry we've seen before. And again, it's because of that open source data and information that others use to improve upon existing solutions, and that's a good thing. Terminator is a movie, not a reality. That said, I did see one of those things recently where that I did see a new technology where it's a robot that uses AI and is able to have human-like emotions and expressions. And my only thought was, why? Which movie did you not see that you really need to rewatch to let you know that this is a bad idea? There are people who are looking into those types of solutions. Ultimately, there's nothing that's even close to the disaster. It's going to replace all human type solutions that I've ever even heard or seen. So even if there are bad actors, it again, to me, fundamentally misunderstands the whole idea of what AI and technology and computers are. Ultimately, they're better at very quickly processing information, doing mathematics, looking through 30,000 different potential training data sets and best mapping an utterance to one of those. That's what it's good at. It does not have the understanding to update and fine-tune and develop and improve those things itself. There are attempts at that. There is nothing that has been close to ever being ready or even close to ready to market on any of those items. Any questions or disagreements? I'd love to hear any disagreements people have too. It's never bad to disagree here. Again, this isn't like a class at Duke. This isn't, you're not allowed to question me. I like when people do. I think that's what drives a lot of intellectual thought and discussion is disagreements or clarification on questions. All right. Well, let's look at what I work with. Let me just go ahead and log in. Cool. Here are my conversational flows. So I can fetch a password. I can reset a password. I can have guest Wi-Fi access. I also have a greeting. We talked about data sets. So let me show you the admin. This is all on our website. None of this is proprietary. NLU, by the way, you see it's named NLU. That's for natural language understanding. There's no difference between natural language understanding and natural language processing. It's our internal school. So I'm going to go to my annotation files. I'm going to load the existing files. And I can look at any of these files. This is 15 lines, 10 lines, 195 lines, 10 lines, 51 lines, 46 lines. When I talked about training things and mapping them, I'll show you exactly what that means. So this is a validation data set. Load. So I want to load this existing. Load selected file. This is going to say, here's an utterance I have from users. This is what it's mapping to. These are the entities. Though in our terminology, intents means the overall conversational flow. Entities are information within each flow that need to be extracted. So this is one of the utterances that I have. This is mapping, this is the start date, this is the end date. You might have utterances that only have one. You might have the end date first. That's fine. How do you train it on these types of phrases where even if the user doesn't say anything like that, but gives a reasonable start and end, it's going to map it correctly? Well, the way that this works in reality is I have a conversational flow of, let's say, guest Wi-Fi access, where I need to know who it's for. I need to know the number of people. I can write specific scripts for my specific use case to have a total number. I can do something like a guest Wi-Fi start date, guest Wi-Fi end date. That's actually the training data set that you just saw in the admin. This is for the start date and end date. That's right here. You can have generic questions that don't need training, such as a Boolean, yes or no. We actually internally under the hood trained it on yes, no responses. And so you can have a lot of different scripts, a lot of different ways to interact with and target specific APIs to have all of this up and running. But this is the way that internally something would work is I would like guest Wi-Fi access for 3 people. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to show you. This is the DEB. That's Digital Employee Builder. That's our flow. I just got this up and running too. Let's do this. Oh, I know why it is. I'm in the wrong domain. That was global. This is 01, which maps right here to 01. You see that it takes you through the flow. It's showing you, okay, what is the name of the vendor? And I'm going to say, that's my company, Amelia. It already knows how many people need access. It doesn't have to ask that because I told it in the initial utterance. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how it knows things and why it's so expensive also. So the vendor right now is IPsoft. It standardizes and normalizes Amelia to IPsoft. That's the name of our parent company, actually, which is doing what it should. It's gathering all of this information. Actually, it's for Cisco. The vendor is now updated to Cisco. And it, again, asks me the same question once again. And I'm going to say 3 people. Today, which is September 8th. Sunday, which is when your hackathon ends, I believe. The end date is 9/10. Are you aware of the rules? Nope. Provides me with all of the different guest Wi-Fi access rules. I can upload a photo. It can grab all of this information. Images. I can upload that. It can display it back to me. It's my daughter posing while drinking milk. It can ask confirmation questions, jump back if you update information. It can understand you are happy. So there's this idea that there's no way to judge or look at the happiness or satisfaction or emotions of a user. That's not true, because I can tell you in our brain monitor here, here's my affective score right at the bottom. So that's going to show you if, for example, I'm saying, I really hate how slow this website is. This affective score will go lower. Negative 0.75. That means the user's not happy. 0.64 means they were happy before. That's why you saw Amelia utter that. These are things that computers can do a lot. This is meant to customize general use cases. The idea being that customer service representatives are now better able to simply respond to anybody who has a specific question. The common things that the same employee does 25 times in the same day, and you have 500 employees all doing that same thing 25 times. That's a waste of time. Let us take care of that. Also, anything where servers are down, Jira tickets need to be created. Any of that can be automated simply by tagging things. These are the ways that AI is used in the real world, in practice. And it's just using training data that, again, this is trained training data, meaning it's mapped to a specific item. So this would be trained. Untrained would be, it's just gathering these utterances and putting them in different buckets that aren't labeled or anything like this. That's untrained. This is trained. And this is why trained tends to be more specific and the only thing that we actually do. Because when it comes to something like natural language understanding, trained data is going to be superior in terms of reliability and accuracy of the information itself. Questions or comments from me about any of this? But you'll also notice things like intent. That's the overall idea. Is this related to guest Wi-Fi, onboarding an employee, and resetting a password? Then we have something that's known as entities. That means the information within those generic ideas. Once it hits one of those, it splits off into that particular conversational flow. Inside each conversational flow, it needs to extract entities or information. We have continuous arbitration, which means every single utterance you make. You saw me do that before when I did that. Actually, it's for Cisco, not Amelia. That's showing you that every single utterance, it runs through all of the intents, all of the entities, all of the training files for each of those. Again, if I went back to my annotation files, this is a very limited implementation. So not nearly the same as any of that, any of what you normally do. So I'm going to do not train. I'm going to do clear all, load existing. This is a limited implementation of 106, 10, 46, 51, 10, 195, so on and so forth. If I wanted to load this one, there are also going to be files that, and this looks like it's untrained and like I was lying, but I'll explain why I'm not. This says, oh, none of these map to anything, because there are utterances we don't want to map to anything, because there's a general built-in fallback and it hits that fallback by definition. So nothing is actually not nothing, it's a fallback response of, I'm sorry, I can't help with that. This customer hasn't built out that particular implementation. That's really what AI is. That's what the use cases are. This is a real world example behind the scenes of not only just the chatbots and GPT, but enterprise level solutions that companies are using and implementing every day to automate tasks that used to take up a tremendous amount of time. All of software development should really aim to do that, where we're simplifying the complex. We're making things easier for people. We don't have to solve the same problem 10,000 times a year. We can have one implementation and solution that we need to customize and continue improving that can do so automatically without wasting all that time. If it's done often enough, it just becomes a matter of economics, of it is more economically efficient to do it as something automated and give people time back in their days that they can then go ahead and look to those tasks. And again, I don't know how many of you have had jobs before or careers, but you always have things on your plate that you're never able to do that you always want to. That's the goal of AI, is to take those more challenging items off your plate. Is there a reality where certain positions will be automated? Yes. Because we might not need as many customer service or customer representatives, really what it is simply a matter of needing to retrain those. That's why I'm so passionate about working with teaching people to get into coding in the same way I did, that I built my career, that I can do these cool types of things. I can make good money and support a family in New York City, which, let me tell you, if you know the price of New York City, it's not easy to do. And that's why those are things that are very important to me. But hopefully this gives you a really good background and information on AI, what these tools are, what's a real world example of that. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I'll sit down for questions, just because I will always go between standing and sitting. But please feel free, come off mute, ask me anything about my work with AI that I've done, what I want to do, the company that I'm creating, the past teaching experiences, the time at Duke, anything at all. Feel free to chat about it. I want to leave about 30 minutes, and I think, yeah, we have 33 minutes left, so good. So give people that opportunity. All right.
Could I ask sort of a general question?
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm like complete beginner at all things computer science. My friend talked me into trying this hackathon. How long does it take roughly to like learn the skills to be able to do things like code AI and the like?
Great question. I would say from the time you start coding to getting up to the point where you could be a professional in the industry, meaning a junior level developer, which again is probably $100,000 a year job, right? I would say that in my experience, that would be approximately a year of time, 60 hours a week, or a year and a half, 40 hours a week. That's my experience of what it takes. The more you follow the best practices and advice, the better you'll be. But it took me about 10 months, 9 months probably, to find a job, but I was probably doing it 70, 75 hours a week. So from start to finish, that's what I would say. You will also need guidance about what are the best technologies to use, what are the best practices, how do you go through it. That's why I went through coding boot camp, is I couldn't find all that information. Like Googling that and assuming everything that I didn't know how to do that. 99% of people can't do that on their own. That's why you go to college. That's why you go to coding boot camps. That's why you find ways to learn this material from experts who've done it before. And if you put in that type of time and effort and you follow the advice that you're given, you can get very good paying jobs. I'll tell you that I also had no background in coding or engineering. I did have a good degree, but that's never done anything for me compared to the coding boot camp, actually. But I had a guy who's a construction worker who is now working with my startup because of how good he is. He did it in 7 months. So from the first time he started coding to the time he was a developer on the job, making 6 figures with nothing more than he was a construction worker, blue collar type who didn't want to put his body through that as he got into his late 30s, 40s, and so on. Better career, better pay. That's what he did. He followed the advice. He did about 75 hours a week, 80 hours a week, and he got a job in that type of time. Learning, I say, the most important technologies, and that's what I focus on in my boot camps, is going to be important. JavaScript, Python, Java, any of those are going to be key. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you. That was a great answer. So I was just turning on the lights because it feels strange if I'm just a blank void,
No worries. I'm so used to that at this point. And my trainings, like at my company, almost nobody's on camera. I always would try and make people be on camera in my classes for the couple of years that I was at General Assembly, teaching as a bootcamp instructor, because I think it's more engaging. And I think you get more out of it, to be honest. It's more like for you. But yeah, it's good to see your face. And again, feel free to connect. Feel free to ask me anything at any time and reach out. One of the things I love about this industry, people are so much more willing in software development, coding, AI technology, to talk to you. I've talked to people who are much, much more senior than I am just by reaching out, and they're very helpful.
I guess I was also wondering, just based on what you said, that you'd estimate it'd take about 1 year, 60 hours a week for someone to learn an enormous amount of knowledge. I assume some people are like better predisposed to this than other people. Is that like your estimate for like what the average person needs, or is that like slightly more predisposed or even slightly less predisposed?
I'd say, if anything, slightly less predisposed. My personal preference is to give, you're right, certain people pick things up faster. That's just a fact of life. I tend to prefer more cautious and less, overly optimistic, ways of saying things, just because even if it's somebody who's more predisposed, we've seen the market fluctuate. Long term, it'll always be fine, but that doesn't mean a 6-month hit like we recently had in the job market for software developers isn't a realistic thing that still happens. So I'd say that's a more conservative estimate, that a lot of my students get it well before then. And that's, again, from the first time you code. That means, like, if I had people who were working in our coding boot camp, we would do 40 hours a week in person plus 20 to 30 outside of classes recommended. Some people did 100-hour weeks, which I don't recommend to anyone because that's bad. It'll burn you out. But I would say most of them would say 2 months of prep work. Some of them did 2 weeks of prep work. The more prep work, the better. But then in the class, if you did 3 months and then another 4 months to 6 months outside of class, usually they had a job if they followed instructions and did 40 hours post cohort.
Well, thanks for the info. That's like super interesting.
Yeah. Now, coding boot camps, especially because, again, I think it's great when people can go to college. I think college is a great experience. in general for a lot of reasons. But if you don't have the money for it, that's kind of what coding boot camps are. I don't think most people have the ability to learn this on their own. And that's the void that's filled by coding boot camps. And then you can do things like get into the industry and learn about, these different technologies and implement cool AI and play around with things and make a good living doing that. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't also interesting and just fun. For me, I like playing around with cool new problems.
It's kind of a random question, but I guess while I have your ear, you ever see the movie Ex Machina? And is that movie also pretty like out of
I
left field?
haven't seen that one. I'm so bad with movies, honestly. Scotty, have you seen that?
I haven't seen that one, but I actually have to refrain myself from constantly bringing up I Am Robot, the movie and the book, because Isaac Asimov coming up with the three rules, and then the way they made the movie, I thought it was brilliant because you have three rules of robotics, which I don't remember exactly, but I think it was one, a robot must obey all commands given by a human. Two, a robot may not harm any humans. And three, two, the robot may not harm itself. Three is the robot may not harm any humans. And I may have gotten it backwards, but I remember basically it was something like that. And maybe it was one, the first rule is you can't harm any humans. Second rule is you can't harm yourself. Third rule is you must obey all issued commands, but there's an order to it. And then the whole time, the dichotomy is, well, why are robots able to harm humans in the movie? And in the book, they mentioned that. And then at one point, there was also the hallucinations. They were trying to figure out, this robot has a vision. Was it just a hallucination, or was it planted by the original creator who was sending a message through that robot? And I think it's stuff like that. When you're talking about, we've been talking about AI and all that stuff since the 50s. Isaac Asimov wrote this stuff back in, I think, the 60s or 70s. So we're actually not even the first few generations debating robotics and AI.
Yeah, by the way, that reminds me, there is a lot of truth to what was said about that. Like, that is a lot of how programs are run. But one of the hilarious things is, like, please test things out, guys, because I saw one article about the military had to stop a robot it created. The idea was they wanted to create a robot that would kill drones or attacks against the US. And so they're like setting it up in simulations, and there's an instructor who tells it if it's an okay drone to go after or not. That's like the human who's saying, okay, this is good, this is bad. And it was given a list of instructions literally like that, where it was like, you get points for killing drones. You lose points if you're told not to kill a drone and you do kill it anyways. And you can't kill the instructor, because don't kill the instructor who's giving you the orders about to kill it. And so the way it worked is, like, the command center would tell the instructor if it was good or bad. The instructor would relay that to the robot. The robot didn't like that the command center and the instructor kept stopping it from getting kills and saying, no, bad, don't kill it. So it killed the command center because that wasn't on the list. And the instructor couldn't get the yes or no, and couldn't stop it from scoring points. Oh, you guys, please be careful with this stuff. This can go very south very fast if you're not very, very careful with this type of technology.
If I could ask, I'd also be sort of curious. I think for myself, I'm unlikely to be going into like tech, but I'm hoping to go into like research. And of course, there's a lot of use of like modeling and computer assisted research these days.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to know, like, what's the sort of like learning barrier on that sort of stuff that's perhaps less involved?
Yeah, so there are going to be a lot of different jobs. Like, so I showed you a little bit about Amelia and, all of this. There are going to be people whose job is to understand NLUs and implement that and build these test cases out. Other people who their only job will be to understand like conversational flows, and they're known as conversational designers, and they'll build out these conversational flows and be able to implement their specific solution with a generic, here's how to train it and get it up and running. So these are common jobs. So I have a lot of people come to my trainings who just, they might be a designer of conversations. They might be more of learning how to get training data and filter it and sort it. These are all roles that are actually existing in the industry right now. In terms of research and background, that would be more, there are large companies that pay a lot of money for, theoretical testing of different things. Those are positions that are available. But I would say to look for sure at a lot of these conversational designers, QA testing, modeling experts, because again, all of these things that I build in my trainings all the time, they create and build models based on these annotation files and the entities and intents that are built out. And then other people just learn to build out these different blocks that are put together to get a solution up and running. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
So there are a lot of like tech adjacent roles, I guess I would say, that involve research or specific implementations for a type of company, but that aren't necessarily developers or, any of that.
Yeah, I guess I should have specified I meant sort of more like, academic, scientific research, perhaps, and things that aren't.
Yeah, so academic and scientific research, there are some of the roles. I don't know as much about those, just to be honest with you. There are always going to be roles because there's always money and interest in that. But yeah, I know a little bit less about that than implementation type experts or tech adjacent roles.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the information. This was super informative, but
That was helpful. And seriously, use my LinkedIn, hit me up anytime. I'm back tomorrow morning to do more of a hands-on, take something with you, exercise with people and all of that. So if you're free for that, feel free to jump on. And hopefully, again, you get a lot of learning out of this experience. And that's the goal.
So I intend to be at the tomorrow one. Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy your Friday. Get some relaxation. All right, Scotty, how's it going?
It's good. Think yeah, like I said, I was like, oh, I'm robot. I was like, no, I shouldn't say things. And eventually I thought maybe I should at least say some things because I'm hosting. That's in. Yeah. So
yeah, I saw him back there. I saw somebody peering over occasionally in the background there.
Yeah, I feel like I should probably be a little bit more active. Well, part of it is I'm at the staff desk. I didn't think about this, but people kept coming asking questions. I'd be like, oh wait, but I don't want to just start picking up and moving around. But actually, let me in the